Hamer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time we're talking about Season 6, Episode 13, which is called Run for the Money. This one starts with a couple of guys, one of whom we learn is Frank Mason, in a limo, watching another guy named Ed Trask walk into a variety store, gaining access to a hidden betting parlor. Trask leaves a briefcase behind, and shortly thereafter, the building blows up. Jim heads out in a blue hardtop for instructions in what I guess is a mini golf course windmill. The mission: Mason is a syndicate man taking over gambling rackets, and Trask is taking out the competition. The IMF must, wait for it, put them out of business. What a shocker. We have an apartment scene with jockey Nick Pressey as the guest agent, and the usual gadgetry and planning that we often have. Off we go to the racetrack where Trask admires Mason's horse King's Friend and watches Jim and Willie come by with their new racehorse called Red Sand. Casey, as a Miss Fredericks, drives up in a huff and confronts Jim, who says his name is Donovan. They talk about Casey being cheated out of Red Sand's ownership. They stage a bit of physicality, which Trask breaks up, his interest piqued in the horse. Barney gets into Mason's facility as a usual telephone repairman and squirms his way into the narrow space between some walls, doing some strategic cutting through the drywall to cut a path into the computer room. He sets up some equipment and changes one of the circuit boards in the computer. He's discovered by Mason's man Miller, and thinking quickly punches him out and then runs out through the betting parlor, barely beating the other guys to the elevator and escaping. Mason is informed that it appears Barney was trying to get into the safe. Trask again unsuccessfully tries to buy Mason's horse, and then visits Casey, asking about what happened between she and Jim. Casey doesn't reveal much. Trask's assistant Jeffers digs into her story. Casey visits Trask later for an impromptu night out, and he doesn't buy her act, so he takes her down to the track, some date, taking a hair sample from Red Sand. The next day at the track, the two watch Red Sand race, and Casey uses a device in her purse to mess with Trask's stopwatch, making Red Sand seem like a sure winner. Jim says, forget it, there's no way she's that good. A few more runs with Casey's device and the sample analysis revealing that Red Sand's appearance has been altered recently convinces Trask that Jim is sandbagging him about the horse, and she's a sure thing. The next day, the track has a huge crowd, and King's Friend wins handily. Casey tells Mason that she thinks Jim is holding Red Sand back to raise the odds for a big payday at the upcoming big race, but he scoffs at the idea. He knows his business, and he knows who the winners are. Jeffers finds out that Casey is acting as a front for someone. She only has $12 in her bank account, and Trask gets him to keep digging. Trask then surprises Jim in his hotel room, confronting him with information that Red Sand is actually a horse from South America, stolen from its owner. He demands that Jim turn over Red Sand's papers at gunpoint, but Jim says he won't do it, and if he dies, there will be an inquiry, and there's no way Trask will get the horse. So he says he'll buy her for $50,000. Jim informs Casey about the offer, and she says she'll get back to him. Casey visits Frank at his favorite restaurant, and Jeffers spots them talking and enjoying dinner. He advises her to forget about Red Sand and offers her the opportunity to make a bet on his horse, keeping some of it for herself. For Jeffers' benefit, Casey calls Jim and says she's been authorized to bid $60,000, and Jeffers informs Trask that she's obviously fronting for Mason. Jeffers then goes to Casey's place, smacking her and telling her to retract her offer, and she does, so Jim signs the horse over to Trask. Barney confirms that the rest of their plan is all set. Parlors around the country have heavy money put on Red Sand. Trask comes over to see Casey, who's going through the motions of packing her stuff up and getting out of town, confirming that she told Mason that Donovan changed his mind to avoid making him suspicious. Mason sees Jim putting money on King's Friend and is told that Trask bought Red Sand, admitting the chicanery with the stopwatch. Mason figures that's just Trask being Trask. He accepts Jim's bet, and Jim's pen sets off a small explosion in the computer room from the circuit board that Barney planted. Miller investigates and discovers that the switch would have kept big odds on Red Sand, regardless of how the betting went. Jim says that Trask was going to bet huge on Red Sand, and Miller confirms that there have been large bets all over. Mason is about to set his boys to get Trask, but Jim suggests that they just let the race play out. After all, King's Friend is sure to win. Mason tells Miller that if any horse is even close to winning, other than his own, Miller should shoot it so that the race is thrown out. The day of the big race arrives. Trask sits in the owner's section away from Mason, who is joined by Jim. Barney keeps tabs on Miller, who climbs up to the roof of the gondola and takes him out. Red Sand finishes in front of King's friend as Mason notices that Jim has slipped away and tells one of his goons to make sure that there are no payouts. But Jim is waiting in Mason's car to prevent the call, and Casey confirms that they have collected the money. The goon tells Mason what happened. Mason orders Trask picked up as he realizes he's lost $4 million of the syndicate's money. The IMF watch as Trask is put into the limo, and then they head away. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of an F. I came into it thinking that that was a grade that I was going to give it because I remember several times when I was going through the series that I got to this episode and I just could not watch it from beginning to end. Kind of like that episode from season 4, which will not be named. I will point out a couple of nice, sort of neat things with it. They don't make up for the bad that I'm going to get to. So I'm just going to mention a couple of nice points. Linda Day George as Casey gets to do a fair bit of good work, pushing the plot forward and kind of and making the episode, kind of come together. Too bad, but it's a complete waste. It's really, really a shame. I also like the character of Jeffers, who is Trask's assistant, the guy who kind of tracks Casey. He seems competent, he seems to know what he's doing, but unfortunately, his competence and effort is also completely wasted. The only scene that I found to be somewhat entertaining in this episode is the one where Barney is found in the computer room by Miller. I'm actually not sure whether or not he was supposed to be found. I have a feeling not. I think Miller or somebody was probably just supposed to find that, the safe had been kind of tampered with. Barney seems to put those electrical charges in there and to distract away from the fact that he had put that circuit board in the computer, to cause the ending to kind of come into effect. And when Barney runs out through the betting parlor and manages to get in the elevator and evade, all of the other people, that was a bit of a neat scene. So there's maybe about 30 to 60 seconds in this episode that I thought was even a little bit worthwhile in terms of watching. But as I said, it's a complete waste. Watching this episode this time, it didn't put me to sleep. But boy, it really, really, really came close. I've mentioned before about the 3 kisses of death when it comes to Mission Impossible antagonists. And I think we've seen, and I hope people have realized by now, that an episode, generally speaking, can only be as good as the antagonist unless there's a really, really, really good story or a really, really unique idea. And even then, you can have a really unique idea, and if the antagonists, suffer from the kisses of death, it's still not going to be a good episode. The 3 kisses of death, in case you don't remember, one of them is lameness. When the antagonists, the marks, are just dumb, or they have some goal which is just completely silly. Like they're just out for money or for power, and they don't seem to be able, they're manipulated very easily. That's really the best way to define lameness, I think. Then there's also schmuckery. If they're fooled easily, that's not good. The IMF is an elite task force. They should not be going after schmucks. They should be going after people who are dangerous, who are competent, who have intelligence. And the 3rd kiss of death for antagonists is being boring, just unengaging. And in this case, I have to say that both of these antagonists are lame schmucks. Richard Jekyll as Ed Trask, Richard Jekyll is a fine actor, but as the Ed Trask character, this guy is a lame schmuck, and I am not the least bit interested in him at all. He's a very, very good example of the kind of antagonist. Some antagonists you want to see them taken down. Steve Forrest from The Visitors as Edward Granger is a good example. The story is good enough. He plays the role well enough that you kind of want to see that happen, and you want to see what's going to happen. I don't find Ed Trask to be the least bit engaging. I think Richard Jekyll, I dare say that this was not a good casting decision. He's not believable as a tough guy, not at all. Herb Edelman, who plays Mason, he's a little bit more interesting. He's a little bit more lively, but really not much. And so I have to say that, you know what? Sorry, guys. 1, 2, 3 kisses of death. You've struck out. And that is really, I just can't get past that for this episode at all. This is a copy of an episode, The Contenders, from back in season 3. And that one was not very good. That one focused around boxing, and it had its own set of problems, which you can go back and look at that review. This is a completely cookie cutter, separate and mislead plot. And, there's certainly no new ground covered here. It's just unimaginative. And I don't want to just keep repeating myself. There's just nothing interesting about it at all. I also don't like the fact that, there's a lot of padding in this one. Just like there was a lot of boxing stock footage in The Contenders. Here we have a lot of horse racing. We see people in the stands and all of that kind of stuff. I just found that to be completely boring. If you enjoy horse racing, well, that's fantastic. But you know what? Certainly the footage that we have here, I don't even think horse racing fans would find it very interesting, to be very honest. That's just me. The teamwork is kind of unbalanced in this one. Willie really doesn't get to do much of all, frankly, because there isn't a lot to do. He's just back to his usual role from the first few seasons. All he's doing is just making sure that Casey doesn't get roughed up or really, really hurt. That's what I saw. Barney has some interesting things to do, but and again, it is mostly about Casey, Linda DeGeorge, and she does fine, as I mentioned. Even the teamwork here is nothing to write home about. I also found, speaking of Casey, the whole interplay between Casey and Ed Trask is just so weird. You would think that they were like, I don't even know the example to give, but almost like an old married couple, that they're running so hot and cold. They're angry, then they're happy, and then she comes over for a date, and it's so lame, and then there's a problem, and this and that, and this and that. And I just, that's really where the schmuckery and lameness, I think, of Ed Trask comes from. Doesn't he realize that this is just really stupid, that this woman has kind of come into town and all of this stuff is happening? And he's just so caught up, as Frank Mason says, on being, a horse owner, and he's dreamed about it since he was a kid and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, all right, if that's what this is all about, then great, yippee, you have a horse and your horse won. And, it's the highlight of your life, such as it is. I have a feeling it's not going to last much longer because of, the ride that Frank Mason is going to take you on. Again, I just can't find myself caring about these guys at all. They're not formidable. They don't seem competent, with the exception of that Jeffers guy. And I just, just the idea of having to watch this again, I'm glad I got through it so that I can just push it aside and just make it a bad memory. That's how I feel, straight up. Anyway, I'm going to cut this one short. I don't want to go any further down this road. Thank you, as always, for watching. Please like this review video for what it's worth. I know the episode is terrible. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments. If there's something that you liked in this episode and something you think that I should reconsider, please let me know. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find it, but I'm always willing to listen. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.